Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming. Oh, I see
Hi,
a Mizu
Mizu.
here.
That's amazing.
So, we're here to show you a little bit behind the scenes of how we made the show and a little bit of our crew. So, we're just going to kick it off. Toby, hit it.
All right. Behind the blade.
So, first, I just wanted to tell you how I came about to the show. Netflix came. I'm going to stand up so you guys can see me. I think we should just stand up.
Yeah, sure.
I came to Netflix, or Netflix came to me saying there was an adult animation that they were going to do, and I had left animation for a very long time, and I had been in the live action space, and I first turned it down. I said, no, I don't want to go back to animation. I'm happy here. But then when I heard it was adult animation, I was really intrigued because, as you can see, these are all the things that lived in my head and what I hold dear as animation in my head. And I thought back to this, and I thought, I think maybe we can do it. So the entirety of Blue Eye Samurai is put together with these images that you see. Those were my inspiration for making the show and how to get the tone of the show, right? Kurosawa, Clint Eastwood, the Memories Anthology, that blew a hole in my brain when I first saw it, Bunraku Puppets, and then of course Tikkan King Creed is one of my favorite animes of all time. Next. Right, okay, and so so what happens when you have to try to create an animated show that no one's ever seen before for adults, and this is the first of its kind? You then have to hire the perfect crew. And so we hired Toby Wilson as our production designer, and of course Brian, and we will go through with you how we did production design and how we did character design. So hit it.
Okay. So creating an Edo world. So one of the things is you could always do this live action. So why are we doing this animated? And the whole point is just to get a visual painting, an homage to Japanese culture and the Edo world. And looking at what's in Jane's brain here, a lot of what you see there, the 2D look, something that's based off of cultural, just authenticity and research, is ukiyo-e prints. The ukiyo-e prints are a 2D medium, and the North Star for us was an artist by the name of Hiroshi Yoshida. And Yoshida-san was born in Japan, obviously, trained in ukiyo-e, but he also trained in European oils. So he traveled the world. You can see I've got on the left his prints from Japan, on the right from his various trips around the world. His style lent itself to our filmic cinematic look. It didn't have that 2D stylized perspective that you normally find in an ukiyo-e print, but it still had the Japanese sensibilities. He still used the principles of Notan to design his values, light over dark, to utilize that line work, which Brian's using in the character design. So if you look at his prints and his compositions, they were a huge inspiration and influence on the show. So that was our Northern Star. And that we brought into creating the world. So I've got a bunch of art here. We're going to click through it. But our show is a 2.5D show. So what that means is if you think about the multi-plane camera back in the Disney days, that has what we call projection mapping. You have layers that are angled towards the camera. And so we would project those in 3D space. So that's one way that we did 2.5D. Another way we did was projection mapping, where you have geometry, you project onto that, and then we did full 3D builds. And here you can kind of see some of that artwork where we've got the 2D plates in the background surrounding. And this takes a whole crew of people. So we've got 2D painter, VizDev artists painting these things. We've got Nur Rahman doing this. We've got modeling team placing these in 3D space.
And how many people did your crew have at the height of it?
VizDev team, VizDev was about 15. We had 5 modelers. Let's see what else. Oh man. Well, and are we counting Blue Spirit?
Yeah.
Do we want to count our partners? I mean, Blue Spirit background paint was about 40. Layout team, that was what, 15? Oh man. Who else?
Hundreds of people.
Yeah.
Hundreds of people.
Easy,
But
easy.
I would like to add that what you're looking at here is something very epic and spectacular, because it had to be. But we also had a budget and we also had a schedule. So that was the toughest part, is trying to make both of those live together. So Toby, go to the previous.
This one?
So we did clever little things, like if you notice the, can you move your cursor to the block of buildings?
Yeah, this guy.
Yeah, if you see that block of buildings and you see the downshot of this, it's just the same block of buildings that's been turned clockwise each time so that you can see, so they look like different buildings, but they're not. We just built one group and kept stamping them to make the streets. And by the way, part of our show, I think what I'm really proud of is the authenticity that and the research that it led to how we build Ado. We took the maps, we took photos, we took paintings. So we knew exactly where the sun was going to set. We knew exactly the placement of the castle. We knew exactly the direction of the streets. So we wanted to give you an idea of what that world actually would have looked like. And why animated? Because it's the beauty of the art that we're trying to bring it to life. It could have been done live action, then it would have been called Shogun, right?
We came first, though.
That's right. Okay.
So then we're painting these backgrounds and giving that 2D look to it. So you see the hand of the artist in the work. The idea is that you can see the brush strokes, but we group those brush strokes and the textures into the shapes. We design those shapes. And what I want to point out here is it's all driven by story. That napkin sketch in the top right, that's where we're working with Jane, we're working with the directors, and we're planning out, okay, where's the army gonna come in? What path are they gonna take? And even though we're 2D we're 2D painted backgrounds, 2.5D, we're full 3D build on the design. We built these spaces because someone over here wanted to shoot for that live action camera look.
Right, so because I came from, I've spent so long in live action, I wanted to bring that live action sensibility in terms of camera, staging, and storytelling. That means that we would scout. In any live action situation, the director and the producers would go out to the actual location or the build of the set and scout it and go, I like this angle, I like this angle. And we would decide that first so that everybody can prep for that shoot. So we did it the same way, which meant that Toby and his team would run way far ahead of us and start building. In an animation pipeline, you would just storyboard it first, and then the team would go, okay, what do you have in the storyboard? But we did it the opposite way. We broke out the process a little bit more to adhere to my vision.
Build a set so the director can shoot on the set.
That's right. And why is it important that we knew where the sun went and all that stuff? Because that's also lighting and direction and what time of the day. Because we're trying to mimic reality and then stylize it, because that's what animation does well.
Yeah, and I just want to point out too, this whole palace and everything, Japanese architecture lends itself to a modular style of building. So, when you plan out a room, you talk about how many tatami is that room. You don't talk about square footage. So it's a modular building just by the culture and through history that actually worked really well for us having to build this on a budget. But also we could build these, we would do these 2D cards for the trees. So why try to make a 3D tree look 2D? Let's just do it 2D and paint it.
Right, and that's also why we settled on the style that we settled on, and we'll get more to that when we get into characters, but I really wanted to celebrate animation, and I really wanted to celebrate live action as well. So, blending both of those, I keep describing our show as kind of like going to a fusion restaurant where you kind of know it's Japanese food, but there's a kind of tweak to it that makes you go, oh, this is refreshing. That's what I was trying to create. But can you go back, speaking of food?
Yeah.
So the plate of food that you see there, those are important things because those are culturally Those represent culture. Food represents culture. So we actually had a food specialist of that time to come and give us a lecture on how they would present their foods, what they would eat. Sushi, sashimi, is a very, very modern thing in Japan. So we got a whole lecture on what was to be eaten. Even the way the rice is placed on the left-hand side and the pickles are in the corner, and that is all very specified, and I wanted to be very authentic to the culture because it matters. It absolutely matters, and no one is ever going to tell me nobody understands what that means, so we don't have to do it. It matters because I know what it means, and you guys all know what it means. So that's what I pushed really hard on.
Because we can.
We should.
Got to put that work in anyway. Here you can see with the build here, that we've got the top downs for the garden. You can see how we placed all of the different cards for the foliage. And one thing that I do want to point out that our team, one of the things that we had to really push for was a natural looking light. That was something that Jane was really wanting to go after, a really believable looking camera and lensing, and thus the lighting had to feel natural while also stylized. So we had some amazing painters on our team in the Viz Dev department. You know, we've got Yun, we've got Kenny, we've got Coral, and I pretty much everybody on the team went through a crash course in just how to paint in the Blue Eye Samurai style. One of the big things that we tried to do is try to get symbolism wherever we could. You know, like if we have to design this wall art in the Byobu screens, one of the things that we did for Akemi is wherever you see Akemi, she has a bird thematic, because in the 7th episode, she's basically a caged bird in her gilded golden cage. So we also had 2 birds because of the whole thing that, you know, her arc where she just wants to be with Taigen, but she's being promised to this other horrible person who she doesn't want to marry, you know, so.
It's called drama.
It's drama. So we wanted to make sure that we had that whole lovebirds theme there too. So if we were going to do artwork, we were going to surround her with that theme. So with that natural light, and we had to build all of Edo, we had to burn it down too. And you know, that look, rather than set it at night, it's set for, we set it during the day so that we could have that.
Right. Oh, we lost our mic. But it's okay, I'm
Yeah, we
really
can
loud.
talk loud.
So
We can project.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stand up again.
Go
So,
for it.
one of the things in the 108 burning of Edo was typically when you have fire, you think, oh, we'll just do it at night because you can see the fire. But our show was completely done during the pandemic. I had not met these two or didn't even know if they had legs until about a year and a half later when we all actually met. But
We're back.
during that time when we went through the pandemic, do you guys all remember that fire we had, that awful fire we had during the pandemic? Do you remember that choking smoke? Do you remember how alien the sky looked? That's what I was going for here, because I wanted a lived-in experience of what that was going to feel like instead of what looked good. I wanted to go with what felt more realistic in a stylized way.
And then this is an example of an episode color script. So you can see how the flow of the color and the lighting starts and ends and changes over the course of the whole episode based off of the tone and the arc of the story and the emotion and everything. So you can see we start on this beautiful spring day and this horrible event where Fowler brings his army, sorry, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the show, and completely takes over the country, obliterating the shogun, and then Mizu comes to save the day and starts the fire, which is also based on actual historical fact. There was a fire in Edo in 1657, and it was caused by Mizu.
Yeah, that's a little nugget for you. But if you look at that shot of Akemi and Taigen on the bridge right there, this whole entire fire was created to stage this exact moment, because right after that, Akemi has her famous line where she says, "I want to be great." So we really had to understand where the story was going, and then set the idea of the image we had for that moment, and then backward engineer the whole thing so that it would come to that moment. And that moment is that she could choose the easy way, which is to run away to the green side, the side that's easy. But she realizes at that moment that her greatness is behind her in that hellhole.
So that's the world. And we got to populate that world with characters.
Who lives in that world?
Yeah.
Oh,
Whoa.
the cast lives in that world.
So we have the most amazing Brian Kesinger to design our character. That's you, yeah? And
I'll Venmo you later. Thank you.
Like, he
A little louder next time.
he is like the living legend of animation, right? And since I didn't grow up in animation, I didn't know who you were. But then people told me how awesome he was, and in designing the cast, I knew that I wanted to be sensitive to making sure that people, Asian people, Japanese people, looked like people, not a caricature, right? So how do we ride that line between representing a character and not caricaturing?
Right. And then you met a big white guy on Zoom, and you're like, we're doomed.
It made me a little bit nervous, but what was amazing was Brian's ability to absorb, to be a good student, and then to throw everything back at my face and made me realize I was wrong. So the first thing we talked about was eyes, right? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, it's Blue Eye Samurai, right? And that seemed to be, as they say, the window to the soul. So we wanted to focus on that, and we knew we were going to have an primarily Japanese cast, but we wanted to have different looks between them, right? Because like live action dramas, a lot of the acting is going to be in here, right? We were moving away from the traditional animation of broad poses and that sort of thing. So we started with the eyes, and we started with Mizu.
Right, and then the other thing about the eyes was that I knew that I did not want to make this into an anime. This
Right.
is not a Japanese anime, and I knew that it couldn't be a traditional Pixar, Disney type of look. So that's what I was charging Brian with, was how do we create a very, very unique look in the characters and how they moved. And one of the ideas I was telling Brian was, when I was little, I used to watch these things called bunraku puppets, and they freaked me out. And if you look at the way Mizu is posed there and her kind of like proportions, it's just like the bunraku puppets. And so that was part of the hauntingness of these character designs that I wanted to bring into to the characters. So we studied that quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit. That really helped unlock the right amount of caricature for the show.
Right, and stylization.
And
right.
stylization, and kept it culturally specific. So we're like, hey, we're kind of onto something here.
Yeah, and if you looked at the different Mizus that are on the right-hand corner up here,
Yeah.
this was a dog pile of everybody just throwing in their idea of Mizu, which was fine because Mizu is a little bit of all of us.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. And she's of mixed race, right? And so is the crew. And so there was some authenticity there too, right? Where, and we were such a good. Our little character team was so great, and Jane was so helpful. We were able to take each other's drawings and draw right on top of it, and there was no ego, right? It was just like, how do we find this? And very much like watching a Polaroid develop. Mizu was developing through different layers
Yeah.
of drawings to what you get in that portrait there.
And then can we talk about line quality really quick and what I said to you about line quality?
Yeah. So because it's a 2D, 3D look, right, they have this concept of toon shading, right? And it's very effective, but for our style, that was the default toon shading look was a little too heavy. And so the line quality was really breaking that kind of style that Toby and his team had set up, right, of the woodblock prints. And so I mentioned to Jane, I'm like, hey, did you see a movie called Tech on Concrete? And Jane's like, yeah. She loved it too, right?
Yeah, and I said, let's just rip it off.
Yeah.
Nerds of a feather.
Yeah, nerds of a feather, that's right.
Yeah.
So we're like, great, let's go ahead, and we went super thin with it.
Like a rapidograph.
Yeah,
right?
rapidograph. In
Yeah.
fact, I took actual rapidograph pens and would practice it out and worked with our partner studio, Blue Spirit, to develop a very specific, unique line just for our show that almost disappears
Yeah.
the farther away you go from it. And that was intentional to give big open spaces of color to play against the
That's right.
detail backgrounds.
Right.
Next.
So here's our Akemi. My gosh, that hair was really difficult to figure out.
So hard.
Because that hair is very, very complicated, but I wanted that hair because it's culturally accurate. We did take some historic liberties, and one was Akemi's look and her hair is about 10 years too early for our timeline.
Yeah.
But what we were saying was that she's a very future forward,
Fashion forward. Right?
fashion forward
Yeah.
character, right?
Influencer of her time.
Huh?
Influencer of her time. When
That's
I-
right.
That's right. She would have been like all over TikTok and stuff.
Yeah.
Woodblock, I think that would
Yeah.
have been called. Yeah.
All over the wood blocks.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Sudarand a little bit too? Because we have our.
Yeah,
Oh,
we will in
yeah.
the next shot. But
Okay, great.
I think Akemi was one of our hardest ones to design, right? Because how do you design a princess that doesn't look generic?
Yes. Or like Mulan,
Yeah.
or right, a Disney princess. You know, any sort of princess in animation has certain visual tropes, and we were trying to navigate around those, right? So
Right.
She could be a little bit more sophisticated. I think the line work helps, and the smaller features. Again, going back to the eyes, right?
Yeah. I also made the character department look at a lot of traditional Japanese dolls,
Yes.
because Japanese dolls were the standard beauty. And you know, so let's pause for a second. The standard beauty in Asia is not what is here in the West. So that's also what I wanted to focus on, was the standard beauty there, not here, because that was a huge part of what we wanted to show in our in this project. That
Right, because
is
there's
the
a lot
point.
of Western fetishization
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
or like projecting what we think
Right.
is attractive
Right.
on Japanese art, and we wanted to go all the way back and say, no, this is what the height of appeal
Yeah.
Right.
for the culture.
You know, one of the things that we did that Shogun didn't do, we blackened the teeth.
That's right.
That's right.
So in the Japanese culture, once you were married, you had your teeth blackened because they didn't wear jewelry of that time. So the way to show that you were betrothed or you were married was to blacken your teeth, and also the sometimes your sleeve. I mean, the sleeve thing was a later thing, but it was the teeth. So we went there.
Want to go next?
Yeah. So the kimono system, that was very interesting and difficult to share with our Western counterparts, because I think when you say kimono, people think it's a bathrobe, and it is not. A
Or
kimono
like
is
silky and
Yeah.
sheer, right? Yeah.
But a kimono it's a kimono system. The standard beauty of that time is to pad your waist so that you look like a tree trunk, so that you were all padded, and really the erogenous zone was the back of your neck, right? So I wanted to also really stay true to that. So this was a drawing that I did to show the animators and to show our crew what the silhouette would look like, and that it didn't adhere to what the body shape was. Much like our corsets and things that we have in the West, we deformed our body to make the costume sit and do what it's supposed to do.
Oh,
So we hired a live action costume designer, Sudarette Lalarbe, who did that, you know, that little tiny thing.
small show in a galaxy far, far away?
Yeah. What was his name?
I believe it's Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh, yeah, that,
Thank
yeah.
you, yes. Hello there.
So she ain't no slouch.
No, she's no slouch.
So you want to talk about how we folded her into
Yeah,
our character
yeah.
department?
Yeah, sure. She was great. She was amazing. And she was actually working on Kenobi while I'm working on this. So on Zoom, I kept trying to like look behind her to see like, what's going on back there? She always blurred her backgrounds. She never broke the NDA. She was good. But she was amazing. She and her small team, her strike force, went and did the cultural deep dive, not just on the kimono system, but the patterns, the research. You know, if you look at our show, we actually change the style of our kimono patterns once we get to Edo, because that's what happens. Kyoto and some of the other towns, cities in Japan had a different sense of style than Edo did. So we had to completely redo that. So she really helped in that. And also, she helped, as all good costume designers do, realize that there's storytelling in costume. Right? And we had characters, all of our characters are wearing a kimono in some form, but it's how they wear it that tells you who they are. And if you look at Akemi, she's, you know, she's a piece of furniture, right? She's upholstered. Right. She's tailored to neck and everything. If you look at Mizu, her character, she's you know, trying to blend it. She doesn't like how she looks. She kind of hates herself. So she carries herself in a less manicured sense. So the sort of thing of how do you change the same garment and tell a different story was fascinating to learn from her. And then on the, go ahead.
Are you going to say talk about the handkerchief?
Oh, no, you can.
So one of the details that really solidified who Mizu was the handkerchief on her neck. And when Sudaret brought over and said, well, that's a traditional thing that you would have as a peasant to wipe your sweat or do. It's a multitask kind of piece of fabric, but she wanted Mizu to have that tied around her neck so that nobody could see she had a missing Adam's apple.
Right. Amazing. Right? That level.
Yeah.
It's so cool. And then just on the technical level, we weren't a cloth sim show. So cloth simulations, you know, in CG animation is a whole nother technical department that allows the computer to simulate the movements of the fabric once the animation's been done. That's a super oversimplified version. We did not have that because of budget. So ours had to be rigged. And so we worked with Blue Spirit, we worked with Jane to figure out what movements we needed so that we could actually rig those sleeves.
Right, and so that meant I had to pack my entire kimono, including that big heavy uchikake there, to France, got dressed and taught them how a woman walks in a kimono, because that walk is very, very different than, that basically, if you know animation, that's exactly what they teach you not to do for a walk cycle. Right? So to really just get them to understand what movement was like in a kimono.
And I just saw Mike Greenhold walk in the back
Speaking
earlier,
of
so our
animation.
animation lead is in the room.
We'll introduce them all in a second. But and I took all my kimono up there and got dressed in like 6 layers right in the middle of the heat. God, that was hot.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, this guy, this jerk. So, boo! We hate you! Mizu should have killed him. Yeah! Spoiler. So this was our chance to, lean into visual contrast, right? The European look. Fowler is Irish, and so leaning into more of the broader features, the big nose, the kind of size. He's a brawler that's trying to fit into this world, and so we really wanted to make him visually kind of stand out, even with down to the red hair, right? If everyone else has black hair, we went quite the other, much more saturated. And we also got to be a lot more broader with his mouth shapes, which are what you design as a character designer to help animation see the range of facial expressions. A lot of our Japanese characters were much more reserved, right, as specific to their culture and their demeanor. And Fowler is brash, and his mouth, expresses that and tells that story in that design.
All right. Life of a Shot?
Yeah.
So in A Life of a Shot, we're going to just show you kind of like what a normal day process, happens in our show. prior to this, what we would have done was a scouting session, and our scouting session, we would also decide on a lens that we would pop onto this particular shot, and I believe this was a 24 millimeter, and we use a Alexa camera with a Cook S4 lens. No, it wasn't 4, it was 2.
Yeah.
It was 2 in the last one.
2
Yeah.
in season 1 we're doing.
So we were being very specific with our lens and camera because I basically wanted to have the same scope that Game of Thrones had. So we just copied their cameras. Yeah. That's where the fusion comes in, okay? So then it would go, that storyboard would then go overseas, and this is overseas layout layout attempt at this scene, and this would get approved and it would move into the next process, which is final animation. And when something like this comes in, I go, oh my God, Toby, fix it.
Yeah. So this is also the first time that we would see the 2D background plates. So we get the full 3D layout, like I mentioned, we build the whole thing in 3D, but then this is where that projection mapping and the multiplane camera approach, the camera mapping. So we see the background painting for the first time. And Jane says, it lost its oomph, this zhuzh. And so that's where then, well, oh, go ahead.
I'm also noticing that the lens is wrong.
Oh, on 27.
Yeah.
We'll fix it later.
We'll fix it in post. So then this is where then we do our, okay, what do we need to do to bring back that tone, the original feeling of the shot where it's Mizu's first time seeing the largest city she's seen in her whole life, and you have that awe and her breath is taken away. So that's where you do the paint-overs, you partner and you work with our friends overseas, and you end up with the final shot.
So, hold on. So what I want to note is what you're seeing takes a lot of people, and this was one of the most incredible crews I've had the honor of working with. You can't make a show like this unless people are really good at what they do, because we have a budget and we have a schedule, which means anything you do, you basically had to hit the bullseye on your first time out, because we didn't have time to go back and re-render or redo again, right? I also want to acknowledge the fact that we had the most perfect script come in by Michael Green and Amber Noizumi. When the scripts are good and they're locked, all we have to do is our job. We don't have to fix writing, right? So that was such a pleasure, you know? Yeah. So
very refreshing.
I want you guys to turn around. If you guys have worked on Blue Eye Samurai, can you please raise your hands? We have some crew back there. Raise your hand. Higher, higher. So you guys can also go bug them, but this was an experiment that I had in my head for the longest time, and I go, I think we can do this, and then pulling a team together and explaining what I had in my head, and these guys go, yeah, okay. You know, that was so humbling, because at one time they could always call me on my BS and go, I don't think that's gonna work, but they didn't. So thank you guys, and thank you for my crew that just kind of went along for the ride and did your best work ever. And so, and because of all of you, we now have a season 2. And I went around hunting for these people back, because you guys all are shackled, right? Yeah. But anyways, we are so honored to be here, and so honored that you guys all came out and that you guys all love the show. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right. We're going to do a very short Q&A. Just go ahead and raise your hand. I'll call you. And keep your question precise, please. Yes, you. So the question was pros and cons of being producer and director.
So that's being partly creative and partly in production, right? And I asked for the production title because I've been doing this long enough that if they give me a number and amount of days, I could tell you it's not going to work. And I wanted to be able to approve the schedule, right? So I don't think there was a pro and con. I think it was all pro, but I did fight with myself a lot going, I want this, you can't have it, but I want it, but you can't have it. So that was the tough part, I guess.
Okay, next. Yes, go ahead. Who's everyone's favorite characters?
Go for it, Toby.
Okay, so from a character standpoint, I love a little known guy named Goro. Like that
yeah.
dude is amazing. I love his teeth. He's so smarmy. He's great.
Yeah.
But I love from just a visual representation of the show, Madame Kaji. I think she is amazing.
Mine has to be Sword Father because I think he's my spirit animal. And for him, it was very important to me that he did that Asian squat correctly.
Jane tried to teach me, I couldn't. But yeah, it has to be Mizu for me. She was the first one we really dived into, and I imprinted on her really quickly. And yeah, I mean, just her struggles, her emotional complexity, her trying to find her identity, being ashamed, all that fun, juicy, emotional stuff was really satisfying to me.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
What research went into finding specifically sword technique, and how did animation help and hinder representing the style correctly?
Well, our animation supervisor is back there, so you can tackle him later and ask him. But we did do a lot of research on how a sword was made. And we're all kind of like process geeks to begin with. So we really wanted to make sure that you saw and understood the process of what something complicated was. And part of that also supported Mizu's character, right? How complicated she is as a character, and that she's mixed metal, and it was all beautiful and very poetic. But yeah, there was a lot of research. It was reading, we unfortunately we didn't all get to go to Japan during then because we were all under lockdown. And now we asked for a field trip and they said no because we already have second season. So
Hurry up and make it.
Yeah. Well, and Jane's bearing the lead a little bit. She does know martial arts and would often pose out and do the motions for us, right?
Yeah. And you want to talk about stunt viz? I mean, there was a whole thing.
yeah, so the one thing we should put that in our thing one day. Yeah.
Noted.
Everyone come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
This is a great rehearsal.
In the back, we have a beautiful little kind of representation of what our production is, and thank you, Ben, and your team for putting that wonderful little exhibit together. But in there, you're going to see something called the stunt team, right? So in live action, when we have a complicated stunt scene, we hire stunt performers and we hire a stunt choreographer. So I just hired that team and we shot all of the stunt as if we were going to shoot it exactly like that. But we don't translate it back into drawing. We just cut it directly into our animatic. And so, like the guy that was playing Mizu, he just wore a blue T-shirt, and then everybody else had numbers on them, so you can track who was who. And so let me show. So to tell you what the power of stunt and action can do, in 101, in the script it says, Mizu comes in, kicks ass, and then stabs this person, knocks this person out. But to me, that was kind of boring because. I'm pretty sure none of you knew what it feels like to be stabbed by a katana. And if you did, I'm sorry. But you know what it feels like to have a toothache or to have your tooth pulled out. And part of that was also because Mizu doesn't talk very much and all the other students were mouthing off to her, and that was her way of saying, shut the F up, I'm gonna pull out your teeth. So we devised this whole entire stunt and action of Mizu breaking their mouth. And that's why that sequence came out the way it did, because it was by design to make you feel the pain.
All right, go ahead.
Since based on the ending of
Yeah, Toby, what are you gonna
Yeah,
do?
Toby, what are we gonna do?
Oh, well, so the ukiyo-e style, I can speak to that. So the beauty of what we get to do in season 2 is Mizu's perception of London. So that's where Yoshida-san is perfect. He is this East-West hybrid. Mizu is an East-West hybrid. So we get to depict how she sees London for the first time through an Eastern sensibility. So I'm actually really looking forward to doing that. But we're not going to drastically change the look of the show. I mean, it still has to look like Blue Eye Samurai because that's how Mizu perceives the world.
And also, our script hasn't come in yet, so we don't even know what we're doing with. This is like real time right here.
But I will say that we're going to have to design a whole lot more white people because we only have one.
That's right. I think our team and Blue Spirit is going to be like, oh, okay, we know what we know what that is.
Merci.
Yeah.
All right. You in the back?
I wanted to ask, is there any update on the potential art book?
Update on the potential art book.
So the reason why we got season 2, because y'all yelled really loud and Netflix heard you. So I'm going to say, if you want an art book, you guys have to demand it from Netflix, and then they will make it. We just work here.
Let's see. 2. All right. Sorry. All right.
We
We'll
love
do
questions.
last 3 questions. You and then. Okay. Last 3 questions. You and then you. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
How did you navigate bringing to life some of the more gruesome scenes? And did you have any like hard lines of can't do that, can't do that?
We don't do anything gratuitous, and most of these gruesome scenes, or say sex scenes, they all are character based, and they all are part of the plot or part of the emotional aspect of it. Everybody knows me knows that if you don't spill blood, then I don't work on it. So, but we wanted to make that aspect of it very elegant and very. It's killing to Mizu. It's still an art. It's like making a sword. It's still an art. So we looked at it not as a gruesome way, but in an artistic way. I don't know if that helps sell the answer.
Designing the way that the blood looks when it
That's
flies through the air.
Yeah,
Somebody's got to
yeah.
draw that and design it.
Yeah. And shout out to Abigail Larson, one of our character designers. I would give her all the gruesome stuff because I hated it. So she was like, sure, I'll do it.
I think I had one over there somewhere. Yeah. Go ahead.
What was your guys' experience working with such a star-studded cast of the show?
Experience working with a star-studded cast.
I think
Sir
I can die
Ken?
happy because I've always, me directing George Takai, oh my God, right? That's like a childhood legend and God, because he was the first Asian face I've ever seen on TV. So I couldn't believe I got to direct him. So I was quite what is that? Starstruck? Star Trek, no, starstruck. So like every take he did, I'm like, that was good, thank you. Like, how do you ask George to do
Jane's
it?
a huge Trekkie, by the way.
Oh, you just outed me. But yes, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so to be able to work with George, I feel like that was a huge bucket list. But we didn't get to physically be in the same room as them because, again, this was done in COVID, so they either recorded themselves in the closet or they had to be in a bedroom. So I think second season is going to. I'll be able to answer your question after second season because we're gonna be physically in the studio with them, But yeah, the cast is just amazing, and just working with Randall Park, my God, And of course, yeah, Maya Erskine, Randall Park, and who else am I missing? Huh? Yeah, and Carrie, who did Swordfather. I mean, those are all living legends, And then Kenneth Branagh, that little dude. Yeah. Sir, yeah.
All right. Last question right here. Go ahead.
So there's a lot of tension in the show, especially sexual tension. Any thoughts on the love drama?
Any thoughts on the sexual tension in the show?
Okay, well, who do you think loves who?
I feel like
Come on, come on, come on. This is Q&A.
Busted.
It goes two ways.
But see, isn't that what's so interesting
It's good
about
drama.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes
Isn't
good
that what's so
drama.
interesting about Blue Eye Samurai, an adult show? Because like they have that in Game of Thrones and House of Dragon. That's kind of like the real life that we adults live in. There's sexual tensions between people, between these guys,
Draw what you know.
Yeah, exactly. Pull from experience.
Yeah. So I mean,
Lots of research.
oh my God, some of the sex scenes that my team and I had to like talk about, and you try not to giggle, and giving notes on penises. Is that right?
Yeah, I've never had to do that before in my career.
That was a new one. Yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't do that in Frozen.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it adult, and I think that's what's so refreshing that we could bring here, because in Asia we do that all day, crying Freeman, and I'm like that's nothing. And I don't understand why in the West we don't have adult animation. It's just such a no-brainer. So I wanted an opportunity to make the show to show the West that it's an untapped opportunity to make programming like this, right? Because there's only so many Tinkerbells I can do.
And you
But
guys
Mizu
supported
Taigen all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mizu
Mizu
Taigen. And you guys supported that. So thank you all for helping us help the industry to change.